Do you think the champion's coming from that group of 4 that's already played, or would you be betting on a team that earned a first-round bye?
That's a tough one because when you look at all 4 teams that won, that were all the favorites, I put those people in the category of that they could win a national title, and now you have the 2 bye teams, that can win, and I'm not counting Arizona State and Boise. So 6 of the 8, I would lean towards the teams that did win. I really like what I saw from Penn State and Notre Dame, and Notre Dame didn't even play well in my opinion. Texas could do it, and obviously Ohio State would play in their best game of the season in their biggest last stand from home. So I would lean towards the teams that did play last week if you're going to pick between the 2.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as Steve. I just think 4 weeks layoff is a little bit of a disadvantage. And these teams have now played already. And I look to comparison. I know basketball is very different. I get it. But how many teams playing in an 11v11 play-in game in Dayton go on to beat the 6, the first round of the NCAA tournament? I think knocking off the rust a little bit, having played with your back against the wall in a win-or-go-home situation. So I also, too, like kind of the value that I'm getting from a few of these teams that have already put it to the test. Like, I like the play of Notre Dame right now, sitting there to get to the championship at plus 225. I like the possibility of a long shot play on Notre Dame at 6-1 to win the national championship, because I think if they can get through this one against Georgia, you're in a really good position going forward against Penn State and then potentially against a team that run the gauntlet the last couple of weeks with Ohio State, Oregon, or Texas. So I like some of the long shot opportunities that we have with some decent prices out there.
All right, Greg, I want to come right back to you because one of those teams that looked very impressive this week, and maybe the most impressive, was Ohio State. And they actually moved to the quarterfinal round and opened as a favorite against the number 1 overall seed, undefeated Oregon. And the line seems to be moving in the favor of the Buckeyes. Greg, is that an overreaction?
No. I think you're still getting the Buckeyes on sale. I think this is the most talented team. And I look at how they played against Oregon the first time around. I don't think they could have played much worse in the secondary. I also don't think they had any pass rush whatsoever in that game. So every time I see a team that loses in the regular season and then they're favored against the same team a little later in the season, I will take that bait every day and twice on Saturday. And I've done it already. I will lose if Texas plays Georgia again. I'm taking Texas. I don't care. I will lose on the pro side. I will lose on the pro side before I get lucky on the public side. All right. So I think in this situation, I think Ohio State's better. I think their passing attack has rounded into form. They're going to be playing the friendly confines of the Rose Bowl, which they've been there before, and weather's not going to be a factor. If the passing attack looked this crisp in sub-zero temperatures, how good is it going to look when it's 75 and sunny at 5 o'clock Eastern time in Pasadena there as the sun sets on the San Gabriel Mountains? So I like the Buckeyes. I'd lay them, and I feel really good about it.
I agree with Greg. I will point out, though, as Dan Lanning said when he was asked about his team's road to a championship and the idea of having to play Ohio State again in their first game in the playoff, this is when I would want to play them. They already had to play a game in the cold, physical game, and you're coming in as healthy as you're going to be in this whole playoff, and you already have the familiarity. I do wonder about Oregon against Ohio State because you have to take advantage of Ohio State's secondary. And in the first game, we saw that. I was there. Oregon did that. But on the other side, there wasn't 1 second in that game in Eugene where I thought Ohio State was going to lose until Will Howard took a knee and there was no more time left on the clock. So it's got some recency bias to it, but Ohio State is a team that looks like they're good enough right now.
All right, let's move on to the Texas-Arizona State matchup. Of course, big man Stanford Steve, Texas a big favorite over the Sun Devils. Would you be willing to lay all those points?
I'd be hesitant just because I think people are going to see last weekend and all the favorites cover, and they're not going to have a problem giving double digits. The issue I have here is Arizona State's defense. I think Arizona State is a formidable dog here. I would prefer them as opposed to Boise State. But when you look at what they bring on the defensive side of the ball, Texas looked great running the football. And how many possessions are you going to get if both teams are trying to grind it, with Scadaboo and Wisner, and then getting Blue involved? But between Boise and Arizona State, I would lead towards Arizona State and taking the points.
Yeah, I think the play here is under, and it's partly because I look at Texas. If they did, for whatever reason, start to get hot offensively against an overpowered and likely an overmatched Arizona State team, then sure. But I think they'll be a little more conservative, because the reason why that thing got a little bit too close for comfort last weekend was they were overly aggressive on 4th down. They were in cruise control of 3 scores, and they get too aggressive. Next thing you know, that gives Clemson some momentum. I also don't think that Arizona State's passing attack and their weapons on the perimeter are good enough to take advantage of a secondary that might have a couple holes in it. So all their offense is going to run through Cam Scattaboo, their outstanding running back, who's a really versatile weapon, but he's probably not going to be enough to overpower a team that has this much talent on the defensive side. So the play that I love most in this matchup is the under. But if I had to pick a side, I'd lean towards laying the points with the Texas Longhorns.
All right, you two sit tight, because we want to break down the other half of the bracket and the 2 other quarterfinal games a bit later in the show. Good start. Penn State, I should say, and the Nittany Lions are a big favorite there over Ashton Genty's squad. Do you think they roll like they did against SMU?
That'd be the direction I'd lean. I know that Boise's been great. And the thing that concerns me about Boise, you watch them and you want them to be a ground and pound outfit. You want their offensive line to dominate. And then you watch and you're like, hang on a second, they don't dominate. Ashton Genty's just that good. So if Ashton Genty's breaking tackles in the Mountain West, that's great. Against guys that are a little bit smaller or maybe not as physically imposing. But the guys he's going to be going against in this Penn State front 7 is a totally different animal. So if the offensive line doesn't carry their version of the game, then this is going to be Ashton Genty having to be a superhuman, which he is most of the time, but will he be in this environment? I lean towards Penn State heavy here. I just don't think there's enough balance in Boise State's approach, and I also think the pass rush that Boise utilizes is great, but it's not going to matter if you can't stop the run, and I think they're going to have a tough time stopping the run of Penn State and that vaunted 2-headed rushing attack that Stanford Steve is likely to take the over on total rushing yards for both and put it in a parlay and probably win. So I think it's going to be a fascinating game, but I lean Penn State pulling away in the second half in this one.
I got to see those numbers first, Greg, before I do anything, okay? But I do like your early inkling of looking at those 2 guys. No, to me, it comes down to Boise's defense. They got some playmakers on the defensive line. They got some good sack numbers, but this is a whole different task, as Greg pointed out. And I just love what I've seen from Penn State going back to the Big Ten title game. I really feel like they found themselves in getting the ball to Allen and Singleton different ways. I saw Aller playing with not as much stress on him. And here against Jennings, you really saw what a big-time defense looks like against an inferior opponent. Jennings was running for his life, took some bad risks, and got burned big time in doing so. So Boise State doesn't have the capability at the skill player position that SMU said. So they're, again, Greg's point, if they're going to score, their offensive line has to play out of this mind. I lean Penn State for sure.